starting to begin his ministry.
Seek ye first the kingdom.
First. There you go. So Jesus gives us a number where to put the kingdom of God. Number one. All right?
I was going to say the history, the area, the place that's probably in analyticals.
History. So you could talk about just the mountain. Jesus was on the mountain. He calls his disciples away. He has 12 disciples. So there's a number of ways you could connect the kingdom, the idea of the kingdom, just from Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Now, let's talk about the visionary. So while you're talking, you're going to include all four of these because you don't know who you're really talking to. So from Matthew 5, 6, and 7, what's a visionary presentation? What's a nugget from the visionary?
The kingdom of God is within you.
The kingdom of God is within you. That's mystical. That's mysterious. That's how do you wrap your brain around that? Somebody else. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Jesus basically says, you have heard it said numbers of times. He says this in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But I say. He's literally pushing the future of the entire religious world. He's rearranging the entire dynamics of the religious world in this one speech, in this one sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Talk about how that this literally changes everything. The Old Testament's upset now. The New Testament all becomes new because of this message. This is the introduction to the new covenant, to the message of the kingdom. That's talking about the future. What about methodical?
Do the will of God, my Father, you will enter the kingdom.
Do the will of God, my Father.
You will enter the kingdom of God.
So if you do this, boom, boom. If you do this, A, B, what's another methodical for this?
Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom.
So righteousness, Pharisees, enter the kingdom of God. It shows us steps, processes. You could also tie in methodical how numerous times he says, you have heard it said, but I say. See, that's a method. He's got a pattern in his speech. Notice that, okay? So, yes.
So once again, he says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these other things will follow along.
Excellent. Seek first the kingdom of God. So you've tied in this. And then all of these things, the methodical, shall be added. That's one verse. Could be the whole gamut right here. The visionary unto you. See how you could take that one verse and really tie it in. What's some connected stuff? Yes.
This is my command, love one another as I have loved you. There's no greater love than this, lay down your life for your friend.
There you go. Love. That'd be a great way to make this a connected thing and talk about how much Christ loves us and the message of love in the kingdom of God. What's another very connected part of this?
The Beatitudes is about people.
The Beatitudes. Very connected. The poor in spirit. Mercy. Okay? That's the first eight or nine verses of Matthew 5. So,
It says, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? You not even tax collectors are the same. So he's kind of relating with the culture and making
totally tying into the culture. Totally tying into the culture. What? Yes.
Well, Matthew 7 talks about the golden rule.
Yeah.
So it would be very connected. He teaches about how to pray and about how we forgive in there. So
That would be very connected. Very connected. What were you going to say, Ron? I'm sorry.
How you judge one another, how you speak one another.
Excellent. So you can see how all four quadrants can be looked at, promoting the kingdom of God, talking about the kingdom of God in this way. So let me take about 3 minutes, talk about finding your style, and then I want to open it up for about 4 or 5 minutes of discussion. Number one, find your style. Don't be afraid to find your style, and that is your technique. Don't try to be anybody else. Now, if you go to the school for salesmanship or you go to a seminar like tonight, don't walk out of here and say, I'm going to do it just like that. That's a horrible idea because you are the best you there's ever going to be. So don't be afraid to develop your own technique. That's your style. Your zone is your passion. Don't be afraid to talk about what you're passionate about. Have you ever met that person that every time you meet them, they have one topic to talk about? And you're like, is that all you know? Huh? Have you ever known a preacher that no matter what they preach, they always ended up at the same place because they were passionate about that? Don't be afraid of being passionate about what you're talking about and honing in on that. And then lastly is your crowd, and this is your connection. You have to connect with your audience if you want to see people transformed. You have to. You have to. Okay, let's take about 5 minutes here. Do I have about 4 minutes? I got about 4 minutes, and I'm going to turn this back over to Bob. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, any ideas that maybe I missed something or you had a thought that came to you while we were talking? Anybody at all? Yes, sir.
I thought it was excellent. It was really, really good.
Thanks.
Typing as fast as my little. But I never really thought so much about the how Jesus, obviously he used parables and Paul used diatribe and vocative of spirit and stuff, but it's amazing how many times we get caught just like teaching instead of bringing story. And I just heard a good one just a little while ago that said every time you tell a story, have a point.
Yes.
Make sure that your story, you know the end game, and that's helped me a lot.
It's not filler material. I like that idea. And let me encourage you, back in the old days, you know, when I was traveling, we had cassette tapes. And I considered myself a connoisseur of preaching because I literally listened to hundreds and thousands of preachers, and I had a few that I would follow after. Now with podcast, it's too easy, people. Don't waste this moment. Find somebody that you like, that you can follow, and pump that stuff into your brain, into your spirit. Preaching, teaching, godly things, kingdom concepts, and follow somebody that you can really develop from. All right? So let me encourage you to do that. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
Jonathan, I had heard this a long time ago, and you're right. Your example was you were seeing somebody you hadn't seen in 20 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That you were using this.
Yeah, just...
So you don't know, like I just went to my 50-year high school reunion. I saw a lot of people that I didn't recognize. I didn't change the Dale.
Hey, of course.
But I heard this said once, that when you're with somebody, if you allow your fingers to run around the rim of their soul, find the crack, and then you minister to the crack. Because if somebody's got money, and their wife's not having an affair, and their kids aren't on drugs, there may not be a crack. And
Yeah.
so, even though all that stuff really is great stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you might have to talk about the mud hens and the walleye for 3 luncheons or breakfasts
Yeah.
before you ever find the crack.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that's important because I think sometimes we want to give them John 3:16 and get them in the kingdom.
Yeah,
And they're not interested in that.
you're exactly right.
And the other thought I had was, how often do we find somebody, and again, there were so many, you mentioned Moody, so many saints that went before us, and tried all kinds of things, but I think it was Evangelism Explosion where they used that, if you die tonight, you know where you're going to spend eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you come across a mom with 3 kids, single mom, and she just found out her electricity's been cut off, and she's only got 1 week of work left, and they're going to lay her off. She doesn't care about eternity.
Yeah.
She cares about getting some food on the table for her 3 kids that night.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so much is relative based on, it's almost like we got to let that person drive the bus,
Yeah,
and we come in with no agenda.
right. And I'm totally in agreement, and I've done a ton of what we call home Bible studies, where I just go into with a person that knows nothing about Christ, and for 3 months, every week, I just go to their house, and we talk about the Bible, starting with Genesis, working all the way through Revelation. Just 45 minutes a week, let me come and sit at your table with you. I've talked about fishing more than I care to think about, and I've never been fishing in my life. I've talked about hunting, and I've never been hunting in my life. I've talked about golf. Now, I love to golf. But I've talked about stuff that I have no interest in. But this is not about the speaker. It's about the hearer. And thank you for sharing that and kind of bringing that to me, because that is so important that we remember one-on-one, I like that idea of running your finger around their soul. And sometimes you may have to do that 3 or 4 conversations before you find the hurt. Speaking publicly, I don't have a problem in the application being diversified. Literally in the application is apply it 3 different ways so that it hits as many people as possible. Same way with the conclusion is having a couple of different ways to respond to this, not just one. This is it. You either respond this way or else. There may be different needs in the audience. So create multiple conclusions. Bob, I'm going to turn this back to you. Thank you so much for letting me have this time.